Hi, everyone, and welcome to Replenish Earth Panel, where we explore climate action through innovative and exciting speakers. Today marks the 5th day of the London Climate Action Week, where we drive the national and international climate policy response, prioritizing green recovery. We'll be exploring 4 particular themes this week: a green, fair, resilient recovery, a roadmap to COP26, sustainable and net zero London, and whole society climate mobilization. I'm Tia Kansara, and today we have a panel from NOW Partners Hunter Lovins, Marcello, Palazzi, and Tom Cummins to discuss how transitioning businesses towards regenerative value creation and the B Corp movement plays a key role in addressing the climate crisis. NOW Partners is a global partnership of 100 plus senior business leaders, change experts, and their teams united to accelerate the economic evolution of multinationals, large family companies, and systems institutions. We empower our clients, partners in their transition towards the full integration of economic success with equitable benefit for all stakeholders, including shareholders, and guess what? Nature. Welcome to the team, Tom, Hunter, and Marcello.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Just to give you a little bio of each of the panelists that we have. Hunter is the president and founder of the Natural Capitalism Solutions, environmentalist and champion of sustainable development for over 35 years, chief impact officer at Change Finance, consultant to governments, industries, communities worldwide, including the Pentagon, the UN, and the US Congress, author and social entrepreneur. We have Tom Cummins, who is an entrepreneurial founder, executive board member, senior management advisor to senior leaders in more than 30 countries over 30 years. He's a creative partner and thought leader for strategic visioning, business performance, and drives leadership excellence in charitable foundations. We also have Marcello Palazzi, who is a NOW co-founder and global ambassador, impact entrepreneur, economist, and visionary for human progress. His 35 years of global experience on focus of better economies, enterprises, and entrepreneurs for public good, and has led and co-led 25 successful ventures across the highest levels of business, civil society, finance, government, philanthropy, academia. My gosh, welcome all of you. I am so excited to have you on our live panel discussion today. We're going to have a few minutes each to discuss some of the work that we're doing, and then we're going to come back and have a longer discussion. So we're going to begin with Tom. Please introduce your topic and share with us some of your thoughts.
Great. Thank you very much, Tia. And thanks, everyone, from the London Climate Action Week. I think the topic that I've been asked to talk about is regenerative value creation. As I thought about this, when you asked the question, Tia, I thought, let's recognize right now that there are a lot of meetings all over the world that are generating an alphabet soup of new names and acronyms. And we're seeing well-being economy, the circle economy, values-based economy. And I want us to recognize from our experience that we're going through a set of breakthroughs, real conceptual innovations right now. And if we see that conceptual innovations actually are as important as technological innovations, this idea that we could have a regenerative economy is really a conceptual innovation. It's an idea that helps us to think about entering a new paradigm of the economy and to give an umbrella that also includes what is it that we need to do from a systems perspective that Hunter will talk about, what is it that we need to do from a deep organizational transformation and strategic perspective in companies, and what is it that we need to do within our own inner landscapes to make these shifts. And I think that everybody's experiencing this right now. So it's the emergent period. And as we see this emergent period, we have to really see there are going to be lots of new ideas floating up and coming up. Where we want to put some time and energy comes, as you said, because about 100 of us around the world said, wouldn't it be interesting if we could really focus on our energy and our effort on the next 10 years? And I think this is something Marcello will talk about that can really take us to a new level of engaging with companies and engaging with both stock listed companies and companies that are in family ownership. And why is that important? Well, if you think about it very simply, if we act together and transition some of the companies in the different industries that we're working at, think about aluminum or cement or chemicals, or think about shipping. There are about 7 sectors that can remove 30% of the carbon emissions out of the climate. But is that enough? And that's the question that we all started asking one another, and many people like Hunter, who have had long years in working on this, said, no, regenerative is actually more than being sustainable. It's really stepping into what can add through the process of transformation. And how do we do that in a way that is really good business sense, and at the same time does something, as you said, for nature, does something for humanity, not only in the developed North, but in the emerging South as well. And so we thought, let's bring together this constellation of remarkable people who have been long working at this, as well as next generation folks who really care deeply about their futures. And let's see if we can't start to work on working towards higher levels of economic evolution, business evolution, that is really repurposing finance and the role that the finance system plays in relation to the work that we're doing in industry. We have several examples of organizations that we've worked with over the years. For me personally, what I saw was I worked deeply in the largest companies in the world, in Shell, in Unilever, in ABN AMRO Bank. I was not happy with the pace of change. I stepped out. I got involved in something called the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. And as I did that, what I realized was there are so many things in a purpose-led company that can be applied to much larger companies. The time was not right in the past. The time is right now. And that's where we are.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Right, next up, Marcello.
Wow, that's great. So one very cool thing for me, at least, I've lived in London for 17 years. So I feel very close to you, despite not being able to come across the channel. So I really care about London, a fantastic city. The other is when Tom Cummings was working in ABN AMRO and Shell, I was working with Anita Roddick at the Body Shop. And now we have come together into sort of a consortium of leaders and change agents. So my pitch is going to be focusing really on the B Corps. I founded B Lab Europe. We started from 0 companies to now nearly 900 in Europe and nearly 400 in the UK. So fantastic. UK is wonderful. And these are, and I talk about B Corps because for many years I've been engaged. Now, I remember I was engaged with Kofi Annan in the early days of the Global Compact and all this big UN stuff. And it always stays up there, in this sort of in the clouds. And it only really translates down to earth when every company in the world and every organization really looks deeply at how they do business and how they can transform and evolve to what we call the regenerative value creation. So my real passion for the B Corps is, you have to certify as a company. It's really hard to become a B Corp. You got to measure everything you do in terms of environment, social, climate, human rights, et cetera, et cetera. It's meant to be, benefit corporations, so for benefit. We have in the UK, Body Shop is a B Corp. We have law firms. We have Innocent Drinks. We have Kickstarter. And we have increasingly some of the mainstream companies like Danone and some of the subsidiaries of Unilever, et cetera, et cetera. So it started really as a movement in Europe 7 years ago with the Triodos Bank and other quite, say, progressive companies, and now it's going mainstream. It's fantastic that it's going mainstream. And specifically on climate, we have started a coalition called the, I think it's called 2030 Coalition. It has now nearly 800 B Corps that have signed up, and they've been working around the world in, furthering and committing themselves to climate goals by 2030 or before 2030. Some of them have shorter time spans, 2025, etc. So if you want to take action, all of you in the audience, look up what the B Corps are doing. You can volunteer with some of them. You can get jobs in some of the B Corps. You can sort of follow them online. There's all kinds of activities. What's really happening now is many of them are coming together in coalitions, not only the climate coalition, but also, B Corps are in 74 countries. In some cities, they are developing renewable energies. In others, they are working on sustainable mobility or health for poor countries, all kinds of areas where entrepreneurship can really be a vehicle for force for good. So do look it up. It's bcorporation.net. I think it's bcorporation.uk for the UK. Final thing for me is to say, as Tia was sharing with us before this call, is and I've loved London, lived in London for all those years. I've worked a lot in Sweden, Denmark, many other countries. But I think the action is to be consistent with the location and the forces at play in your country, in your city. So it was wonderful to read this morning that it was announced in the UK that by 2030, no more diesel, petrol cars sold. Maybe that could also be made shorter or sooner, like 2025. So work on that kind of goal. I think the power of consumers in working with their banks. We are very lucky. We have had Triodos Bank in the Netherlands and in the UK. But go to your banks and ask questions about what they do with your money, with your pensions. Because this is the story of the grain of sand or the starfish in the sea. We all think we are too small, but actually, if each one of us just takes a little step in this direction, then we have momentous change. So I love what Tia is doing with the idea of smart citizens, smart cities. It's a sort of work that Tom and I were doing 25 years ago with the UN Habitat in moving cities to be more sustainable. My good friend in London, Jeff Mulgan, now, Sir Jeff Mulgan talks about mesh governance. And mesh governance is really at every level, citizens, municipal, employees, CEOs, bankers, all of us, we need to work together in a much more coordinated way to actually achieve these objectives. If we do that, it actually can be quite easy, because that's the power of networks, the power of mobilizing people. And the real final thing is, the UK is where Adam Smith was born in Edinburgh. I visited his home. And so it's amazing, in the country that created in a way, the free market economics. And now we need to move that to a new paradigm. We call it regenerative value creation, which is a much more active governance of the economy by citizens and other decision makers. Everyone is in it. So again, in the audience, if you can find a way of being involved in your borough, in your region, in your city, get involved at the municipal level, really demand and expect that your municipal government is more active in governing the economy. Cities can do so much, You can ban plastic, you can ban, dirty cars, you can put public transportation. You can look at Copenhagen, what Copenhagen has done, amazing with all kinds of innovation. So the future is in your hands. Thank you.
Beautiful and really, really well said. Hunter.
Regenerative value creation is not just a new buzzword. Buckminster Fuller pointed out back in the 1930s that regeneration is the principle by which the universe operates. It is the principle of life regenerating itself. What we have done in business, in our current paradigm, as Tom and Marcello have said, is to move away from that, to believe that we're smarter than nature. We can master nature, we can control nature and make it do what we want. And we are learning at our peril that nature bats last and owns the bat and the ball. As a planet now, we face many crises. COVID is a very small crisis compared to what the Club of Rome has called the planetary emergency, this mashing together of the climate crisis, the crisis of loss of biodiversity, the crisis of systemic inequality and racism and exclusion. These are crises that will destroy us as humans. They are capable of ending life as we know it on this planet. And if we continue as we are, this is what will happen. As my friend, the business leader, Ray Anderson, put it, what's the business case for ending life on Earth? There isn't one. So, interestingly, many of the great business leaders like Paul Polman, like Emmanuel Faber of Danone, like Walmart, are committing to become regenerative companies. Now, in many cases, they have no earthly idea what this means, but this is part of the work of NOW Partners. We are working with many of these great business leaders. I served on the Unilever advisory board for many years, and in fact, put to them that their goal of a sustainable living plan, while a great first step, was wholly insufficient. They needed, as a company, to commit to be regenerative. Well, now they have. And we are all together figuring out what this means. Now, in terms of climate action, there are two very specific things that we need to do. The first is to stop the emissions of carbon from burning fossil fuels. Is that possible? Yeah, and it's happening. And it's happening for fundamental economic reasons. Renewable energy is now cheaper everywhere on the planet than burning fossil energy. So as a result, you see this competition between, for example, Portugal and Abu Dhabi as to who is going to have the cheapest utility scale solar, with Portugal saying 1.6 cents a kilowatt hour for solar energy, and then Abu Dhabi saying 1.35, and then Portugal saying 1.31. 1 cent a kilowatt hour. The electricity that you get from the grid probably costs you 12 cents or 20 cents, or if you're in a developing country, as high as 50 cents. Just running an existing natural gas plant is 4 cents. Running a coal plant is 4 to 6 cents. Running a nuclear plant is even more. Building a new coal plant is 10 cents. A new gas plant is at least 5 cents. Solar is coming on at 1. But the sun doesn't shine all the time. Okay, couple solar with wind, with batteries, 3 cents a kilowatt hour, still cheaper than just running an existing natural gas plant. And this is why you see fossil energy plants being closed. This is why India recently canceled 14 large coal plants. They said solar's cheaper. This is why China is going renewable. This is happening. Why did the UK just commit to stop the sale of diesel and petrol cars? Because electric cars are cheaper. And this is why they are spreading. By the way, California did that a couple months ago. And I think by 2030, we will see the end of cars as we know them. We'll all be driving electric cars. I mean, I already do. Again, because it's cheaper. Then you go to the autonomous electric cars. You want to get from here to there, you just whistle up one of these little autonomous things. It comes, gets you, takes you where you want to be, and goes on about picking up other people. Doing this is tenfold cheaper than the system we have now, where you pay to buy, fuel, maintain, and insure a private vehicle. Why would you? So young people aren't even buying cars. And with the autonomous cars, this will be even cheaper. This is the work of a man named Tony Seba, S-E-B-A, and I recommend you get and read his paper, Rethinking Humanity, in which he says we are in the decade where we are going to transform all of the 5 core sectors of the economy: energy, transportation, food, materials, and information/communications. These are the core economic drivers that have given us the system that we have. It's not only that we need a new paradigm, we need a new economy because the one we have is collapsing. Carbon Tracker, one of the great UK organizations, has shown that the value of the about to be stranded fossil assets is $25 trillion. Think about writing off $25 trillion. And yet we, you and I, and the world's taxpayers subsidize the use of fossil energy to the tune of $5.2 trillion a year. We're wasting money. Let's start putting that money to good use, building renewables, distributed renewables, solar on your roof. In Germany, many communities own their own wind machine. There are communities in Germany that are 100% renewably powered. Surprise, Melbourne, Australia is 100% renewably powered. South Australia is from time to time. Portugal is sometimes 100% renewably powered. It's happening. The second thing that we have to do is to shift to regenerative agriculture. This is agriculture that first and foremost feeds the health of the soil, because it is from the soil that all life, all of our food derives. Carbon in the soil is what gives the plants in the soil the ability to pull up nutrients. It gives the soil the ability to hold water, and it gives the farmer profitability. We have been decarbonizing the soil by plowing it, breaking it up, turning it upside down. And then because the soil is dying, we pour chemicals onto it. We use big machinery, which compacts the soil. We are reinventing agriculture. And doing that is taking carbon from the air and putting it back in the soil. So a man named Gabe Brown, a North Dakota corn soybean farmer who was going broke, said, I'll try anything. I'm going broke. First, he went to no-till. He stopped breaking the soil. Then he planted cover crops, deep-rooted crops that took nutrients deep into the soil, that take nutrients from the air and put it into the soil. But now his fields were covered with these cover crops. How could he grow his corn and soybeans? He turned his cows out throughout the winter. So now he didn't have to buy feed for the cows. They ate down the cover crops. He came through, drill seeded his corn and soybeans, got higher yields because the animals eat everything in front of them, trample everything under them, fertilize everything behind them, move on, and don't come back until it regrows. This is how the world's grasslands co-evolved with grazing animals. Gabe has gone from a little under 2% soil organic matter in his soils to over 11%, in some of his fields 15%. Every 1% soil organic matter is 5 to 10 tons of carbon. Gabe has been taking carbon out of the air, putting it back in the soil, and becoming profitable. This is just better business. This is the way in which, if we were to do this on the world's grasslands, over 30 years' time, we could get back to concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere of 280 parts per million, the pre-industrial level. We know how to solve the climate crisis at a profit. So you don't have to argue about the science. Assume climate change is a hoax. Don't go to the casino on the odds of that being true. But if all you are is a profit-maximizing capitalist, you'll do better if you're scared to death of climate change, because we know how to solve this one at a profit. In that sense, the science just became bar talk. Let's just do better business. So this is what we are doing at NOW Partners. This is what we're doing at the Club of Rome. And this is what I am doing today in Colorado, kicking off the Colorado Regenerative Recovery Coalition. This is the first meeting of a coalition of several hundred businesses, scientists, citizens, government officials who have all come together to push for a regenerative recovery here in Colorado. We're working with the governor's office. We're working with many of the state agencies because we know how, not just to build that better, but to build forward, to build an economy and service to life.
Thank you, Hunter. Thank you for that. I think, one of the core elements that I'm hearing from all of you is that the time is now. And I think the name NOW Partners sort of represents that, the call of the time, the action that is required right now. So, can you tell us more about why now? What is unique about this moment to create this level of change? And why now can businesses address climate action?
So I want to start. For me, one of the keys of now is this connection also with the B Corps and the B Corp movement. We now have 3,650 B Corps around the world and over 10,000 by law, benefit corporation by laws, and more countries are joining in. And for me, the real power was how do we use this fantastic community to inspire many other businesses to change. So this is one my specific taste. We have examples, that's unbelievable, from Patagonia to Innocent Drinks, Triodos Bank, Danone, Kickstarter, the biggest, Blackberries and other berry company in Chile, all doing amazing work, from, saving energy, using, everything renewable. Also, we have run a campaign about inclusive business that looks at the social dimensions. So how do we use these fantastic, these models to help and inspire other companies? So anyway, B Corp handbook. So, B Corp, I'm passionate because what I said earlier, too often we stay up here. We talk about policies and, our economists are always trying to influence policymakers, which is good, but if it doesn't get internalized in each, from a small business to mid-sized, large companies, we don't really get the change we want. So this would be one of my inspirations for NOW Partners. The other, and I finish with that, is to say that, you see, how fantastically knowledgeable and experienced Hunter is. It's people like Hunter and Tom and all the other partners. We've known each other for so many years. And this is the time for us to come together in a kind of collective of fantastic change agents, professionals, and the B Corps and other companies and the CEOs and the owners that really want change, because really it's only by us coming together that we can get a critical mass to make a difference. So these will be my two takes on why NOW Partners.
I think for me, there's a now of the present, but there's also a now of the past and a now of the future. And when I say that, I say it advisedly because there's a lot that we can learn from our experiences of having initiated movements, having created pathways to move forward. And you see great companies that have been able to do that, Patagonia, the B Corps. And what happens now for me is there's a crystallization of it. And, I think some have lived long enough to see that when things coalesce, that's when you've got to jump in. And I'm now really speaking to all the people who are out there listening in London and beyond. If you just, as Marcello said earlier, decide you're going to buy differently. So for example, if you say, I'm going to put my money in a bank that is part of something called the PCAF initiative. Now, it used to be that the only banks we would think about being involved in are the sustainable and social banks, but it turns out that the sustainable and social banks have now built a measuring system for all the banks. This is called PCAF, the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials, which now some of the largest banks in the world are signing up for, which basically says we're going to measure the carbon output of our customers. Well, very clearly, everybody who's sitting out there right now can simply say, I'm only going to bank with a PCAF bank. That probably requires very little shift. So these opportunities presenting themselves, and I think as Hunter said, sometimes we don't even know what we're stepping into. I mean, people didn't know what perestroika was. People didn't know that the Berlin Wall was going to come down. But at a certain moment, there was a turning point and a shift. And to catch the now is what matters, right? To see that we're entering into a new era where like the book that was made about 6 or 7 years ago, here comes everybody, right? It's possible that people can step in their own way and doing their own small, unique thing together, as we are doing in NOW Partners, or individually, that you will have the backing of some of the largest banks in the world, some of the largest pension funds in the world. The world is shifting.
I'm proud to be working for a B corporation. The little company that I helped create, Change Finance, is a B Corp. And what we set out to do was just that, change finance. We built the first exchange-traded fund opened on the New York Stock Exchange that is truly fossil fuel free. 100 large cap American companies. So if you want to invest in the standard economy, except if you will, it is the Fortune 500 without 400 assholes. We have very, very high standards of social behavior, of environmental behavior, of governance behavior. So if we have a company in the hospitality sector, they have to have a policy against human trafficking. And by picking the best companies, we can deliver to investors the best performance. Again, it's just better business.
It is better business. I think what makes it so unique is that we have these kinds of new business opportunities, which we may not have considered before. So what kind of change needs to occur to transition businesses, into this mindset? Because I think there is a huge amount of transformation happening already out there. And there are, as you say, over 3,000 companies that are already B Corps globally and rising. So many companies that are becoming more aware of what we're doing at NOW Partners, and also many organizations that are being led by people who have gone through this sort of transition or transformation. So what would you say are some of the frameworks that you've used that can be recommended to leaders today, or people who are transitioning away from what one would call the sort of fossil fuel economy to one that is transitioning away from into a regenerative economy?
Well, I want to say one thing. The numbers are 3,650 B Corps and 12,000 benefit corporations by law. One of them, which I forgot to say, is The Guardian. So The Guardian is a B Corp. And I think that for you in the audience, if you can kind of gang up with The Guardian and create a real citizens movement where you can coordinate your work and get the media outreach of The Guardian, that would be fantastic. I'm sure The Guardian would love that, because it really is about collective action. I was just checking now on my phone, this Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize a few years ago, all about this sort of all this tyranny of the commons, or why we can't succeed to change the commons. In other words, the economy of the whole, the economy of our cities, of our nations, and it is really because we don't act collectively. So this is a wonderful opportunity for people in cities, and Tom and I work in cities. I live in Amsterdam. I see how much you can do in a city, because basically, like someone many years ago used to say, all politics is local. Well, I think actually a lot of sustainability is local too. I mean, there are, of course, issues about the global economy, but still, if in every city, every village, we created real local economy, sustainable economies, we go a long way towards, making a difference. So in London, so much could be done. I just want to add one more thing. I was thinking, it's a bit funny enough that even in the Netherlands, we have the problem that all corporations that are not Dutch, or in the case of London, British, are often not subject to the same standards. So we have all kinds of international companies in Amsterdam, and they are basically not governed by anybody. They're like cowboy companies. So I would also go after some of these international companies and make them also comply with what other local firms, national firms are doing for CO2 emission, for other, dimensions of sustainability. And it's strange, and London being such a global center, it has really a huge power also in reaching out to these corporations and other organizations that have an impact all around the world.
Companies need to set science-based targets. They need to set their own target. They need to understand their own footprint. They need to report to Carbon Disclosure Project, the brilliant UK initiative started by a bunch of kids. Well, Paul Dickinson had some gray hair, but basically it was a bunch of kids who just sent out to the Financial Times 500, biggest companies on earth, a little survey saying, what's your carbon footprint? As you can imagine, for the first few years, the companies said, who died and made these kids God? Well, Walmart. When Walmart put out its sustainability scorecard, question number 1, do you measure your carbon footprint? Question number 2, do you report to CDP? Who? Now, essentially, every major company on earth reports to CDP, Carbon Disclosure Project. And what CDP has found is the leaders in measuring and managing their carbon footprint have 18% higher return on investment than the laggards, 67% higher return on investment than the companies that say, we're not going to measure our carbon footprint. Again, this is just better business. Where we are now, if you will, is in a degenerative economy. We're destroying life on Earth. And you need to come up this arc of transition through what's called green to what's called sustainable, able to sustain. Through restorative, we need to repair the damage we've done to becoming a truly regenerative company. And one of the things we do when we work with companies is help to get them on this transition, showing them that at every step along the way, it's more profitable. They cut their costs. They cut their risks. They enable themselves to be invested in by impact investors. And this is where young people want to spend their money. It enables them to attract and retain the best talent. It enables them to have their workers be more productive. Engaged workforces are 26% more productive, 21% more profitable, according to Gallup Healthways. It enables them to differentiate their brand and better manage their supply chain and reduce the cost of distrust. These are all material contributions to a company's bottom line. It's a way of accounting called the integrated bottom line that one of the founders of NOW Partners, Walter Link, and I invented back in 2001. This is now being used. This way of accounting is the basis of the IIRC, International Integrated Reporting Committee, created by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales. And the Prince of Wales is accounting for sustainability. It's starting to be used by companies around the world. Now, B Corps do this anyway because that's how they're created. And it's one of the reasons they're having such success.
Maybe something I'd like to add to that, and I think it picks up the thread of Hunter. If we're talking about being sustainable, it also starts with a kind of inner sustainability. If we're talking about restorative, it means we have to invest in our own personal restoration. If we talk about being regenerative, we have to think of ways that we shift from being the know-it-alls to being in continuous learning and continuous curiosity. And I think for one of the first times in human history, we have the possibility through learning across the internet to tap into some of the deepest wisdom of thousands of years, connected to some of the broadest minds of people everywhere who can bring new ideas. I sit on a jury at the Talberg Foundation where we go through 2,000 leaders to identify 3 leaders who are doing remarkable things in the world. And whether you look in Ghana at Bright Simons, who has just developed a way that they can know whether there are fake pharmaceuticals being produced in Ghana, or whether you look at a young woman in California who's right now built a data tracking system to monitor every next thinking that's going to be happening in what's happening in villages across India, where they're trying to develop and move people on in their lives and their livelihoods, which can be monitored by data, which can be tracked, which can create feedback loops. There's this possibility for all of us to go to an inner transformation process and think about that in a regenerative way. And I think that one of the things that we see is that you've got to be able to connect that inner transformation to the kind of organization that you're living in. There is no perfect company. There are companies that are just on the road to regeneration in one form or another, or they're going to die. And the point is, if you can get into a company and you can realize, gee, I can find a little corner of this company where I can make a real difference. You know, I've worked with young leaders in banking who managed to create, the first regenerative and sustainable banking principles in their banks. What did they do? They took ideas from Brazil and brought them to Amsterdam. They thought and went to Basel and asked, how can we link this to the measures that Basel is using? So building coalitions and new forms of relationships, and the nature of these relationships from a regenerative point of view has to be coupled with the thought that we are now in a place where we can work mutually in addition to working transactionally with one another. Business has always been quite transactional. We now see the mutuality of working together on a common cause, and that really ignites a lot of energy. And that, of course, has to connect to the big system transition that we're making. So we try to operate on 3 levels and try to work on what motivates these different levels. How do you build capability on these different levels? And that actually leads to the breakthroughs. You've got to be working, you've got to be tilling that garden.
Tia, I see here there are a couple of comments from my good friend Lars Ling, one of which is, why do we focus too much on urban smart city and forget rural areas? So I say, I was talking about cities because this is about London, so it's not to diminish the importance of rural areas, but to say that cities like London, there's a lot you can do. And of course, cities also, urbanization is growing and it has been growing, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to tackle cities as well. The other question he asked is feedback on the SDGs, good or bad? Are the SDGs good enough? Again, I take the first shot. They are not perfect. I'm not sure whether they're good enough, but they're definitely good, a good starting point. And then coincidentally, the B Corp, so the organization B Lab behind the B Corps, has created the SDG Action Manager together with the UN, which is a way to make it even easier for companies to implement. So I think the real value is that it gets people to think about the questions and the issues that a company is facing with when becoming more sustainable. So it's like the right kind of questions. And maybe, again, it's not perfect, but I think at least there is a process that asks the right kind of questions. And then, obviously, it's our responsibility to decide what to do about those questions. So that's what I would say. He's also last asking another question.
Lars has been quite active.
He's very active. We have only 10 years before the world goes under. Still nothing has happened. Well, actually, I don't think that nothing has happened. A lot has happened. And I think that, well, for some of us who've been doing it for a long time, one of my statements always is, well, where would we be if nobody had done anything for the last 30 years, We would have probably gone under 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And then secondly, I think that yes, of course, 10 years are the time frame. We are, NOW Partners has been working with Pope Francis. Some of us are sitting on Pope Francis' commission. He's become very active. Even yesterday, he publicized many of the ways in which the Catholic Church is divesting from fossil fuel. It's really, there's a whole map on the internet, but hundreds of places around the world where the Catholic Church is divesting. And there is a real kind of mission, and the Pope is organizing a meeting of other faiths next April, where all the world faiths coming together to help everyone who belongs to any faith in the world, to really think more actively about what can you do as individual citizens to make a difference, because we really need all the billions of people to make a difference, to live and work and engage in economic activities differently. So I am optimistic. As even last night, I was watching this short video with Obama announcing his new book, and Obama said it very well. He said, we've never had so much knowledge. We have never been so connected globally. We, in a way, it's a pretty peaceful moment in history in comparison to the wars of past years. So if we only, tweak it a little bit more, we can have enormous impact. So I'm optimistic that if we really work collectively globally, we can make a big difference. Sorry for taking long, but yeah.
Yeah, I do.
The 10-year comment came from the scientists who warned that if we don't start flattening the curve of climate change dramatically, we will go beyond the point at which we can prevent irreversible damage. But we're already there. As we speak today, people are dying in Honduras, in Nicaragua, from being hit the second time by a hurricane, this time a Category 5 hurricane. This is the first time in history there has been a Cat 5 this late in the season. If you look around the world at the impacts of climate change, it's already on us. It is urgent that we not wait for 10 years, that we act today. As Greta Thunberg says, adults say we owe it to the young people to give them hope. I don't want your hope. I want you to act as if the house were on fire, because it is. Mm-hmm. And what's needed is action now, today, in
Correct.
Every aspect of society, by us as individuals, what we buy, where we invest our money, how we live our lives, whether or not we've fixed up our buildings to be less consumptive of fossil energy, transitioning to 100% renewable energy. What do we eat? Are you getting your food from rural farmers who are growing food regeneratively? Do you even know who grew your food? Are you part of what's called a CSA, community supported agriculture? You shop at farmers markets where you can talk to the farmer and learn how she's growing the food that you're eating. You will get healthier food. You will get a healthier body. Every one of these are choices every one of us makes every day. Find what it is you care about and live your life so that it shows it.
Beautiful. Tom.
Well, just to put an exclamation point on what both Marcello and Hunter have said, I did this little experiment 2 years ago. Well, even 10 years ago, I started by saying, what's one thing I could do every year that would reduce my footprint? And for those of you who've done this, it started with some of the community movements, each year, last year I sold my car. And of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so I don't have to travel too much. That was lucky. But what's remarkable is that at first it becomes a real irritation, and it becomes something that you miss. And then it becomes something that you're really proud of. And then it becomes something that you become part of. So there are personal experiments that I think we are all trying and need to try every day that get us moving in the right direction. And as far as I'm concerned, when I think about, one of the questions that Lars was asking, how is it that, what's different now from the 1960s where everybody was recognizing climate change? Well, I think we talked about limits to growth then. Now we talk about limits to time. And it's limits to growth and limits to time. And that needs to not have us become paralyzed. If I take the oldest scientist I know, Sylvia Earle, who is still going down in diving capsules in the Pacific and creating hotspots around the world. If I ask Sylvia, how do you feel right now? You've seen it all and you've watched the oceans be decimated. She said, that's right. She said, we're going to lose potentially 80% of the species before we even give a name to them. And then she turns it around and she says, but you know what? Now we know. Now that we know, we can build whole industries to protect reefs. We can build whole industries that harvest, wonderful fruits of the sea in organic ways. Once we stepped into the mindset that we're actually part of nature, and that's what regenerative value is really about, things shift. You get closer to the ground, you get closer to yourself.
I think in terms of that default, I think it's really fascinating when people, are quite curious why things haven't changed up until now. Like, if this was the time, if this was the science, if these were the businesses, then how come yet not everybody is on board? And I'm going to add to that are we living a life of default? Are we living everything by the 9 to 5? Are we living things in the old systems or the normal that was? I think COVID has given us this opportunity to recognize what not a non-normal situation could be. And I think this is the first time in our living history that we have the chance as a global community to recognize what that transition could look like, considering we are all experiencing something that is transformative, even if that means that we're not living the normal life that we would normally have taken the train to go to a normal job, to go to a normal office. So what normal isn't is what the default was, right? So when we are looking at the potential for shifting and changing our own businesses, we are the people that we've been looking for. We are the change that we've been looking for. We are the commitments that we've been hoping that will evolve our own actions, climate actions for the planet to regenerate. So often we're looking at the other and we're not having that chance to look at the mirror. I think if we're looking at the other, we're not looking at that mirror to see what kind of shift and evolution we can have in our own spheres and in our own lives. So there is this personal commitment. I think this evolution does take place on a personal level that then transitions to our communities, our professional work, and then further afield. I really wanted to take a moment just to honor all three of you for the work that you've done. As part of NOW Partners, as well as, the work that I think for the legacy that you're creating for us to continue is something really, really powerful. And I wanted to honor 30, 40 years of you're planting the seeds, cultivating the seeds, watering the plants, even though, the weathers were bad and the pollution was high. And I think that sort of fertility in your thinking and continuously plowing ahead, despite, I can only imagine 40 years ago when you were starting up, how people were thinking then. And, like Lars is saying, well, what do we do about it? Well, we do the actions that we can, but we have to think differently. And I think that's where, are we living a life of default is the question. And it's an opportunity for us to understand where that polarity does exist.
We are living in the most exciting time imaginable.
Hands down.
When I started doing this work, my heroes, Dana Meadows, David Brower, Ray Anderson, we were all working on this together. We knew what we needed to do. And I did not think that I would live to see the change. Martin Luther once said, if I knew the world were going to end tomorrow, I'd plant a tree today. But I didn't think I'd live to see it. Dana died in 2000. So did David Brower. Ray died in 2011. They did not see it. About 2014, we started to see a change. Renewable energy just started to explode, and it became clear it was cheaper, and it was going to become ever more cheaper than fossil energy. Corporations started to pick this stuff up, communities around the world. No, we have not done enough. Every one of us has not done enough. People tell me what great work I've done. I said, if I were any damn good, we'd have solved these problems. Tremendous work left to be done by every one of us. And yet I am alive to see this change happening. We are going to make it.
I think that one of the things that's interesting to see is that a lot of the changes we're seeing now had these deep root systems that were growing over the course of years. And I think of this quite often like the bow wave of change, to mix my metaphors, is there's always something coming before. You know, Marcello's work with the Talberg Foundation, which created the possibility that we could bring different financial institutions together, and we could, you know, Bill McKibben could stand up on this hill in Sweden and declare, it's going to be 350.org, and today I'm going to put something in the newspaper, and all of you are going to sign your names to it, which just was the inspiration that the rest of us could rally around. And I think this is the time to be daring, to be persistent, and just about the time that we think we're going to give up, that's when I notice things start happening.
I mean, I was thinking, Tia, this amazing young lady, Clava Hogan, who started Force of Nature. She's 21, and she came on a round table we organized, and she said, "Oh, I started advising CEOs when I was 17 about what to do with sustainability, etc." So I think one of the things you could do is to get people like Clava, you know, the 21 years old, and put them in the boardrooms and go and, you know, blast some of these meetings with the urgency of what we need to do. Because many of them, and I remember I had lunch with the chairman of a big law firm, and he said, "Oh, my daughter, every day she's coming to me to ask me what am I doing about the planet, you know." So we got to get these young people to really push the older generations. In the Netherlands, we have an example in the IUCN created a program called Leaders for Nature, where they got 50 companies, and they didn't go to the chairman, but they went to the younger people in the company and said, "You're going to go to the chairman and get them to change." And it was very successful. So I think, you know, if there are young people in the audience, this is one of the things to do. You know, go to the boardrooms of the companies for which products you buy, you know, because everyone buys products and services, your banks, your retail, food stores, and start having an impact, because it can be really very powerful, and it's a way to actually be active, show your citizenship. And by the way, on citizenship, I'm on the board of SIX, which is a wonderful network of social innovators, 16,000 social innovators, based in London, actually, founded by Jeff Morgan. And we've been thinking about, we really need to change the contract that we have as citizens of our country. So being a citizen should also come with some, you have a lot of benefits of being a citizen. Look at people who don't have a citizenship. But what do we do for our country? So we should actually be much more demanding of us being citizens. And in a city, you're a resident in a city. Everyone who's resident in a city like London should actually be doing something for the city in terms of shift to sustainability. So I would think this is really worth exploring and working with different boroughs in London. What can the city expect of the citizens to do? Because that's also, Tia, your work with smart citizens is really the way to go.
Some of this is being written into law. The Welsh have the Well-Being of Future Generations Act that was put in 2015. There is a group of what are called well-being economy governments. Wonderful woman named Catherine Trebek up in Glasgow is working with about 7-8 governments around the world who are looking at committing to well-being and to becoming regenerative countries. Costa Rica is doing this. New Zealand is looking at this. This is the future.
Absolutely. Tom, any final words?
Well, I think that George Bernard Shaw said that it's the unreasonable people who get things done in the world. So be a little bit unreasonable once in a while. And as Marcello said, make some demands of your own and see what happens. It's all a grand experiment. And it's the way that you orient yourself to this new life. You know, when people were in the whaling industry, nobody was saying, gee, I'm going to go use some of that oil that's spilling all over the ground in Pennsylvania and start to do something with it. And it took a long time before people started to build these columns and develop different forms of petroleum products. And then it took much, much longer to realize that this actually was doing something to our atmosphere. Now you've got very large companies, and we're involved in some of those, who are saying, hey, maybe in the bio-based world, we can get rid of all those old columns. Now we've got to grow things in vats. And since there are only a few vats around that, you know, have 1,000 kilos that we can grow in, and we've got to go to 1,000,000 kilos, let's start putting money on the table to make some of these things happen. And so little by little, but the main thing is, if you're in there and you're, you know, the mosquito irritating the elephant, I think there's an awful lot that can happen.
All hail to the mosquitoes annoying the elephants. That's all we've got time for. Thank you all very, very much for joining this panel. Thank you, Marcello, Hunter, Tom. Thank you, NOW Partners. We've got a very special pledge. It's called the People's Pledge by Replenish Earth that we're really encouraging people to take, and that is to, you know, think of the small and important actions. Everyone has a choice, and that choice is yours, where you spend your time, where you spend your efforts, and you can become that replenisher too. And for us, we've got an incredible challenge that we've shared on all of our Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and it's called Rise to Replenish. And every single day we have a different theme, and each theme has actions and suggestions on what you can do at home to make the world a more regenerative, replenishing place to live for you and for all. So thank you all very much for joining the panel discussion today, and see you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you.